Hello, I'm David Heyman, and I play Brace on the TV show Taboo. And you're listening to the Shat on TV podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Taboo FX, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit FX show Taboo. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is Big D.
Good evening.
This is our fan email episode where we look back on the week's episode of Taboo and provide our feedback on the top listener emails for the week. This week's episode was entitled Episode 6, so you spent an hour listening to our ideas on Tuesday's Deep Dive, and now it's our turn to hear from you. We've been getting a lot of emails. It's still going strong, despite some talk on the previous episode and on social media about some of the viewership maybe dropping off of the show. The core audience is here with us. Each week we have more emails than we could possibly read, so that's excellent. And I think that we've had a few more days to digest this episode 6. Any new thoughts on that, Big D?
No, I think, like you said, the audience has stayed pretty consistent. So along with us, we do really enjoy the show still, and it's never going to be a show that has mass appeal because it is dark, the topic, the period. What surprised me was a lot of the things I saw online about people being upset with Winter's death. That still, a child murder really still affects people, which surprises me in the violent world we live in today.
Yeah, I mean, considering all the other things that you see in this episode, a child being killed is not something new on television or in film. So it was interesting to me as well that this was a shocking thing, especially since she had so little screen time that I was amazed that people grew such an attachment to Winter. Some of the other things we're going to talk about on this episode is the relationship between James and his son. We're going to talk about James' relationship with Zilpha and his mom reaching out to him and what that was all about, freaky as it was. And a lot of the emails actually seem to focus on Zilpha in this episode, which makes sense. This is the first time we see her do any killing. This is the first time we see her be intimate. So she will be the focus of a lot of these. If you're not a Zilpha fan, bear with us. There are other things we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I also want to apologize. We usually try to watch the episode before it airs in the U.S. On BBC One. So this week we got the episode of the Deep Dive. I had it done early, so I posted it. And right away on Twitter, somebody came back with complaints about Winter's death. I was not even thinking. I had a complete brain fart that the show had not aired in the U.S., and I responded. Immediately, one of our Twitter followers goes, "Hey, thanks, Big D. Good work. Way to spoil it." So I apologize about that. I really will be cognizant of it and not do it in the future.
That's very honest of you, Big D. I'm sure the listeners appreciate that. It will not happen again. I apologize for Big D because I don't know. I don't want him to stand alone on that scaffold when they yank the gallows. So without further ado, Big D, if you're ready to go, let's go to the river. All right. The first email came in right under the wire. It's from Joe D in California, and it's titled, "Why Delaney is So Reckless." He says, "Hello, gents. Thanks for putting Taboo on my radar. I love the show, and I had an idea about why Delaney is so reckless and unafraid. James appears to have visions of the future, and because of this gift, could it be possible that James has seen visions of his own death? If this is the case, then he knew he would not die in a back alley in London, or in a duel with Thorne, or on a carriage transporting gunpowder. He has already seen images of his own death. And, raising my hand, my guess is that so have we, during the title sequence at the beginning of each episode. I think that of the many images we see in the title sequence of James underwater, one is actually in the future. This could all fit in together since his mother baptized him underwater, and then he almost drowned again after the sinking of the Influence and experienced a rebirth in Africa. So in the third and final act of his life, after he gets his revenge, I think his story will end underwater, and James knows nothing can stop him before that. Thanks again for a great podcast, Joe D. in California."
Well, I like this, and I had brought this up to you before we recorded, I think it was on Monday, that I was paying a little more attention to the opening sequence. And there is a shot that looks like James in a uniform that we assume is the East India. But then subsequently, there's the photo which Joe attached where he is not in uniform. But what really struck out to me was the American flag floating in the water. We have no reason to believe that James has ever traveled on a ship that flew the American flag, unless what Dumbarton has promised is safe passage to the U.S. That really would make the future visions of his death being the opening credit very possible.
And I recall, Big D, you asked me, did you see a Union Jack anywhere in the water? Is there anything to indicate what else was going on in this scene? I think it's a great observation. And for me, again, my taste in literature, my taste in television, I was a huge fan of the movie Carlito's Way. And movies where it doesn't always quite all work out for everybody, or The Departed, again, movies where it doesn't quite work out for everybody really appeal to me because that's reality sometimes. And also the actions of a person, if they are even deemed slightly heroic, are amplified and more heroic if they lose their life during the course of their mission. So I agree this would be a really cool thing, and also kind of a nice nod that we've known all along what's going to happen to James, and it explains why he isn't afraid of death.
Yeah, I think it would explain the fact that he seems to be a step ahead of everyone. But also, I always go back to what's the most likely cause of his recklessness. Could very well be that he is on a time constraint. Whatever he is planning is really, really tight. He has to get it done now. All the pieces are moving. But I think it would be a beautiful, a more eloquent finale if we've already seen the very end of it. But very astute observation, Joe.
Thanks, Joe. Next up, we have an email from V. This one says, "Hey, gents, I love your podcast and followed you over to Taboo from Westworld. I only began watching this show because you guys were reviewing it. I have now become obsessed with Taboo, watching each episode multiple times in order to pick up the subtext, and have you guys to thank for introducing me to this show and to the actor Tom Hardy. Good work. That being said, I wanted to ask you guys for your opinion on how Zilpha's story arc will progress now that she's unleashing her inner crazy. I'm worried that she'll become a liability to James and mess up his plans, but she might also be an asset, taking Winter's place as the creepy sidekick with bonus supernatural powers. Usually, the guy gets the girl at the end, but with 2 more episodes left, it's hard to imagine that Zilpha will sit around doing nothing. What role will she play from now on? Will she and Lorna become BFFs? Also, does Brace know about their incestuous relationship or about Robert? I also hope they don't kill off any more female characters. There are so few. P.S. I like to listen to your podcast right before I go to sleep at night so I can drift off to the sound of your quibbling voices." And that's from V.
Oh, that was very sweet, V. Thank you. Yes, I do as well hope that we start to get a stronger turn for Zilpha. She's been a victim and abused for so much of the series that she deserves to come into her own. And I just hope they don't take this dark, turn that she's in as almost that she's going to become a sidekick to James, or she'll be paired up with Lorna. I'd like to see her stand on her own.
I do think that Zilpha's power has now been kind of unlocked, and she's really letting that crazy go. As I've said before, she had a strong desire to suppress something inside of her, and I think that that something is dangerous. I think we'll see that in the next 2 episodes. I don't think she's going to disappear off or take a second fiddle to James. I think she's actually going to become a more prominent character in these last 2 episodes, and I again stick by the fact that I predict there will be some sort of super dark reveal about her as well.
Yeah, Joe had mentioned in the email previously that there was a possibility that James has foretold or foreseen what's going to happen. If that's the case, he did not see Zilpha murdering Thorne. That was one of the biggest elements of last episode in the series so far that caught him off guard. We very rarely, with the exception of blowing up the ship, that Zilpha felt James commanded her to kill Thorne. He's completely unhinged by it. So I don't know if that's because she's so close to him emotionally, but yes, I really do think in the end she might be one of the key pieces that brings James down.
Thanks so much for your River Rant, V. Next up is Tony from the Garden State. Tony writes, regarding Brace's claim that James's mother tried to kill him as an infant. My theory is that his mother was actually trying to protect him as an infant with a ritual practiced in her tribe. Water seems to be a spiritual conduit in this show, and perhaps her spirit is still trying to protect him, which would help explain his superhuman invulnerability and also foreshadow some serious hurt about to be heaped upon Delaney. When researching Native American rituals for newborns, I came across this. And this is a quote. The Wichita people had their own customs postpartum. On the morning after the baby's birth, the elder women of the tribe would take the newborn down to a stream or river, would pray for protection, strength, and health, and then bathe the babe in the stream. Other Native American tribes were said to have done similar river immersion rituals for the first year of life for the baby. I'm not sure why the untimely vision of his mother placing him in the river came to him during his romp with Zilpha, except for that he may be stirring up some mystical psychosexual complex with his renewed incestuous relationship with his sister. Anyway, my 2 pence. Cheers, Tony from the Garden State.
I believe it's likely that at this time period, people could easily misunderstand mental illness as a form of possession or supernatural. It's also likely that they would presume a foreign religion or practice or ceremony and completely misunderstand it. If you told someone, let's just say, another planet, they came down and we discussed a traditional baptism, they might look at us the same way that Brace and Horace looked at Anna essentially baptizing James.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw people taking communion, and I was absolutely baffled by this. I was like, okay, say what? So you're going to drink wine, that's the blood, the wafers are the body. And they're like, no, it literally is the body. And I'm like, no, it's symbolically. They're like, no, you don't understand. It becomes that. So again, depending on your frame of reference, these things are malleable. Another possibility is simply that James is an evil thing, and his mother recognized that and was trying to put a stop to him. Like maybe he brings about some great evil. And in that case, we keep treating James as a hero, and really the only reason we have to believe that he is a hero is that he's Tom Hardy and the show's about him. But when you look at it from any other perspective, he's not exactly a good guy.
Yeah, Brace describes that Anna was in a frenzied state, that she was trying to drown him. But if Anna thought she was actually trying to save James or save his soul or do some form of exorcism, if she did believe he was evil, she would do everything in her power to finish the ceremony. But God, imagine if Brace sat down and saw a Moyle come in and perform a circumcision. He'd think that was wild too. So I'm tending to believe that it was misunderstanding and definitely part of a normal tradition that Anna was used to.
Big D, you just brought back just a flashback of my birth at Long Island Jewish Hospital. It's giving me shivers right now. Thanks so much, Tony, for your email. Shout out to the Garden State. Next up, we've got one from Tanya from Tokyo. This is a long one, but it's a good one. Tanya writes, I must admit episode 6 was my most favorite episode so far. It was intriguing, it was disturbing, and we got to find out so much more about many of the characters, not only James. I feel like the writers of the show have really made an effort to flesh out the motivations behind each of the characters' actions. We now see that Sir Strange is not just another black and white evil dude who lives off human suffering for the sake of it, but a man with a business interest in slave trade that just happens to be illegal at the time. Godfrey might be genuinely in love with James. Otherwise, why would he so foolishly expose himself in the broad daylight, running like a fool to James's house to warn him about the raid on his factory? Yet, the character who, in my opinion, in this episode we got to know the best was indisputably Zilpha. I remember you guys discussing one of the listeners' emails suggesting Zilpha could be the elder sister and the person to initiate her and James's sexual relationship. After episode 6, I think we can definitely say that James is to blame for the entire thing and has been the one in control over what is going on between the two of them all along. First of all, Zilpha believes that James is using his magic and told her to kill her husband, and that she was just following his orders, finishing Thorne off. She then doesn't just stay at home relieved to have liberated herself from her abusive spouse, but she rushes to her brother to announce what she's done, as if seeking his praise and approval, even though it's the middle of the night and it's raining like hell. And how happy and, dare I say, exhilarated she looks in his living room, taking off her heavy coat, letting her hair loose, getting herself a drink, and smiling like a child. This might be the first time we see her acting like her real self and not the rigid shadow of the wife she had shackled herself into by marrying Thorne. These could just be my crazy female viewer speculations, but James might have been Zilpha's first sexual partner, who had initiated her into the world of pleasure and personal freedom. hence the allusions to the spring awakening, and had given her the love she so clearly lacked from her father's side. I'm 100% with Gene on that take that fucking dress off scene being fantastic and hot. I've changed my mind about the incest after reading a young adult novel, Forbidden, by Tabitha Suzuma, and doing some follow-up research on the topic, and truly hope that James and Zilpha end up together. Thank you very much once again for your amazing podcast, guys. Can't wait for episode 7. That's Tanya from Tokyo.
I think there are a lot of people who are forced to live lives that aren't genuinely who they are. People often fight with the idea of who they should be, who they want to be, or who they actually are forced to be. Religion plays a big part in that. For a long time, Zilpha does seem to have been boxed in, restrained. It doesn't feel like she was emoting any form of personality, that we got to meet her. And that's why this episode was so jarring, whether it's the way she dresses, her assertiveness, the way she talks actually to Lorna. There is a change in her. And the only thing I can really believe that is this is truly who she has always been. And for killing her husband, she thinks James is the one who has freed her. So she goes to him gleefully. I really think that her strength and her personality will only come out even more in the next 2 episodes.
I agree, Big D. In addition to that, you see so many characters in this show who only have one mode, right? So we see them, even Goddard's, regardless of what he's wearing, he's still just Goddard's. Atticus, James, Winter, Helga, they're all fairly transparent as to who they are. There's not a lot of hiding there. Even double agents or secrets, people with secrets, Dumbarton, Lorna Bowe, they still are consistent in who they are. Zilpha is the only character and the only actress who's been charged with completely doing a 180, going from stoic, spooky, reserved to completely letting loose, being a killer, wanting that booze, not caring about being wet, not caring about just, throwing off her coat. So this is one of the biggest transformations we've seen in the show, and one of the toughest acting jobs, which I think, Una Chaplin just nailed on this. So wonderful observation. I don't know if I'm on board with James being the one who pushed this relationship. It still feels like she is the one in control. With all of his animalistic instinct, with his command that she take that fucking dress off, James still, in essence, worships Zilpha, and I think that he knows that she has the power in this relationship.
Yeah, let's not forget, Zilpha, even in the beginning of the series, was not a church mouse. She was not a frail, little, shy being. She often would drag James around by the collar, whether it was a scene in the church where she asserted a sexual dominance over James, where she wanted to make it her last time on her terms. She often teased him in a way that makes me believe they were equal participants in them. James sees something in Zilpha that he needs, and James is maybe that key to freedom for her. But you mentioned recklessness and that freedom and breaking out. To me, that's worrisome for James, because James has been methodical. He's really planned it out. And injecting a wild card like the chlorate that's volatile could easily blow up James's entire plan.
I agree. Thank you so much, Tanya, from writing all the way from Tokyo. And she actually included a little story. If you haven't heard it, Big D, I'll read it to you later, of how she found us, and it's pretty fascinating. I was really touched by that tale. We might not read it on the air, but please include how you found us, because that's just really fascinating to me, hearing all those stories. The next one up is from Joe E. And Joe E. writes, during the most recent episode when James was getting busy with his sizzy, I think I noticed something odd. Did you notice something odd, Joe? There's a lot going on there. When he starts tripping out mid-thrust/choke, I took it as him seeing, in my opinion, a vivid similarity to Zilpha and his mother. She looks far more Native American than he does, and I wonder if he noticed their similarity too. To take it a bit further, I think that Zilpha may be the daughter of Papa Delaney's native wife and not James. Perhaps this is why she tried to drown him. It may be a stretch, but I can't think of why they would cast an actress who has the raven features of a Native American if there will be no connection. That's all I have so far. Hope you guys enjoy the remaining episodes, and I look forward to American Gods in a few weeks. Peace and fucking, Joe E.
Well, we've seen how water triggers James's memories, flashbacks, visions, whatever they are. It would make logical sense that his sister in a prone position on the bed in the throes of passion very much resembles James's flashbacks to the river with Anna, his mother. So that was the trigger, was the similarities in the appearance. Whether she is actually, the birth mother and James is not, I don't know that's as important as the trigger which brought the memory back, whether it was water or Zilpha thrashing around under him.
Yeah, I remember Big D when we first started watching this show. One of the first observations we had was, when it was brought up that James could be, biracial or multiracial, and all of us thought, well, that's weird because he's about as English as you could possibly look, and isn't that odd? Now, not to pigeonhole a person, a lot of people can be multi-raced or biracial and not show it at all. And likewise, the other way around, people can be, quote unquote, pure-blooded and not look anything like their race. So that's not really indicative, but it is interesting that Zilpha looks so much more like she could be, part native than James does.
Well, here, I'll give you my personal experience with this. It's kind of funny. My nationality, my background, my mother is Swedish. My father is Italian. I look very Aryan. I'm a white guy, blonde hair. My wife is a darker Brazilian. Her grandparents were black and German. Our daughter looks as Aryan as they come. She looks like a blonde little Hummel figure, like she's Hans and Gretel. People who meet my wife, they think either she's adopted or she's babysitting. She looks almost nothing like my wife as far as coloring. So we can't put too much into this, that James doesn't have the similar features, because it is a crapshoot. You don't know what you're going to get.
But do you think it's possible that, again, if you look at Horace Delaney, he looks by all indications quite English. And if you had an English woman as a wife, wouldn't it seem odd that Zilpha turns out with all these, dark raven features?
I think a lot of strange things happen. I think genetics and family history and genealogy, it's not an exact science.
That's a good point, actually, because in 1999, I lived in Ireland for a month or so while I was studying there, and people thought I was, and I never heard the term, but people thought I was Black Irish. I'd always had the impression of what an Irish person looked like, and I actually noticed a lot of people in Ireland kind of looked similar to me, and it was really fascinating to me to know that how the genes work themselves out.
And also, people see what they want to see. So if they think James is a wild man, he's the devil, he's crazy, they will see those features in him. And maybe we're just seeing that in Zilpha because we want to believe that she is Anna's daughter.
All right, peace and fucking to you, Joe. Up next, we've got an email from Stacy again. Stacy is a repeat writer. And she's writing about the different properties in the show and the different elements. And Stacy writes, Earth. The properties of magic in this show has been heavy with spirit, water, and fire. We see wind when James uses the dust. Blood is the element that binds, connects, and possibly reveals your true nature. I've noticed the lack of physical earth. Finally, we see James literally get down and dirty digging Thorne's grave, and right after is the physical encounter with Zilpha. There you have it. 2 episodes to go. Stacy.
I don't even know where to go with this. Are we looking for the Shankara stones? Is this the fifth element? So we have dust, blood. What are we missing? Earth?
Right. What she's saying is that the physical earth, like if you look at the show, especially set in London, you've got the Thames, you've got water, you have nautical scenes, you have blood and you have fire, very prevalently showed, rain, all these things. But what you don't see a lot of is solid earth. Even when we do see the ground in London, it's often muddy, sludgy. And I think what she's saying is when we do see solid earth, in the case where James is digging the grave, it seems to give him some degree of strength. I took this more as an overarching thing of how the show, again, when you read a book like Heart of Darkness, or when you read a book like The Great Gatsby, you have a prevalent motif. What is being used as the messaging medium? And I think in this, we're seeing that the elements, in the primal sense of the elements, in the pagan sense of the elements, are giving us indicators of how people relate to one another, where people find their strength, and what powers are in use during different parts of the plot.
Well, I think also the earth, or the lack thereof of solid terraform in the show, could very well be a metaphor for James's footing. that in London, things are very fluid. He's never really on solid ground. Things are uneasy and constantly in motion. Or it could just be, London in the 1800s was a very muddy place.
I think it's a combination of both. Thanks for writing again, Stacy. Next up is Anne. Anne writes, I'm enjoying Taboo, however, it just leaves me with so many unanswered questions, which I'm curious about how they will reveal with only a few episodes left. I'm used to dark, gritty Dickens type of dramas, as well as the Jane Austen types I grew up with in Ireland. I'm right with you, Anne, on that. I didn't grow up in Ireland, but Dickens and Austen are in my DNA. I do wish the characters would talk like real people, i.e., at the ball, wouldn't James have introduced Lorna to Zilpha? After all, she's the stepmom. Or when Zilpha meets Lorna while powdering her nose, wouldn't she had said, oh, I'm Horace's wife too? I got frustrated with Lorna following him around like a lost sheep and wondering who the hell was that about nearly everyone there. All the best, Anne.
Yeah, well, we debated that when the ball happened, that I felt, her desire to be announced as Lorna Delaney was for her claim on the estate. You and Roger felt it was more a claim on James, that she was there with him. Do you still stand by that?
Right. Whether or not that's a genuine desire of hers to be with James or be connected with James, that is definitely what I believe Lorna was trying to project in that scene, in addition to, evidence of the claim. Every time we see somebody do something publicly in this show, it is done for a reason. When James goes to the reading of the will and pays people off, when he purchased the ship, he's extraordinary about it and offers a huge sum of money. It's all about making things seen because, again, that's how things are documented. You have public knowledge of that event. So I agree with you, but I think that she was also sort of trying to subtly inject herself into his life. As for the way people talk in the show, I'm a big fan. I like that there is some complexity to the dialogue. I don't need it to be necessarily realistic. On a modern show, I sit on the opposite side of the spectrum. I hate when I'm watching a TV show and the dialogue doesn't seem legitimate. However, in period pieces, much like Deadwood, when I used to watch Deadwood, I was a huge fan of what I would call the blowjob monologue. Several characters would talk quite eloquently while a prostitute was going down on them. And it wasn't realistic, no, but it was very enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, I think when you can have a conservation of words, if you're able to get across a thought without having to droll on and on and on, I think it shows a skill of the writers. But let's remember, this is very much like Anna said. She said it is a dark, gritty Dickinson-type drama. The show has really broken molds as far as what we expect all the way through so far. So let's not, hold our breath for a bright, happy resolution that seems fulfilling. We should all be expecting that this dark, gritty drama will end in a dark, gritty, unsatisfying way. And I'd be okay with that.
Me too. Thanks, Anne. Next up, we've got Gary. Gary writes, hi, guys. I followed you guys over from the Westworld podcast. I'm really enjoying the format and interplay of the three of you in each episode. My wife and I are both really enjoying Taboo. We watched the latest episode on Saturday, and I've had to wait until today to hear your thoughts. I'm unsure if Taboo has life beyond season 1, and that's fine with me. It's a well-written, produced, and acted series that may or may not resolve everything by the end of the season. I'd like to see Taboo renewed for a second series, but I'm not sure where the narrative might go. If it isn't renewed and is left with Delaney's plot to take down the EIC, it would better fit with historical fact. One of the things I do like is that there are no clear good guys or bad guys. All the characters are various shades of gray. We shall see how the season resolves the final few episodes. Regards, Gary.
Yeah, I totally agree with Gary. I've found lately that a lot of shows will structure their first season with an open door to season 2, season 3. Everyone's trying to build, the next Breaking Bad or the next really long series. And to me, it really cheapens what season 1 should normally be. Now, have you seen Stranger Things?
Yes.
I enjoyed Stranger Things. Is it the greatest thing on TV? No. But it was clear that their end cap, that their closing episode was structured in a way that left a giant door open for season 2, which they're filming now. I felt unfulfilled. I felt like the entire first episode was a prelude to really what the story will be. And I felt like I'd wasted my time. So I'm happy if Tom Hardy, FX, BBC does one season, closes it right, and that's the end of the story. I'd rather have that than them try to stretch it on to 2 and 3 when the story doesn't warrant it.
One of the things I really love about the BBC and other, British programming is that it's perfectly okay for a show to go 1 or 2 seasons like The Office did and then just end. That it's okay. We told the story we came here to tell. And I love that. There are a couple different ways you can look at these things. And sometimes I agree with you, Big D, it's fulfilling and sometimes it isn't. For example, The Killing. When The Killing was made, the US version of The Killing, it ended after season 1 and you thought, great, that's a wrap. We solved, the murder is solved. We're done. But when it launched into season 2, it made sense. It was okay to make an extension of it. That made perfect sense. There's other shows like Stranger Things where you are unfulfilled with just one season. Imagine if the X-Files ended after 1 season. Where does the story go? Who are the big movers behind it? What is the upside down? So you've got all these questions. Then there are other shows, yet again, like Deadwood and Carnival, that had a logical arc and were cut off midway. And that's the worst because you don't ever get to see what happened to everyone. And hopefully, if this does only go 1 season, I'll be happy with it. But maybe we could end up with something like Firefly, where you have a movie that follows up and kind of, wraps it all up in a bow.
That's frightening. You stole my exact thought. I was going to talk about Firefly, that, 14 episodes, people were still clamoring. We need more. We need more. You really don't know. If Firefly had gotten a 2nd or 3rd season, it might have gone off the rails. It would never really been thought of again. And it wouldn't be held right now as this almost time capsule of what could have been. I think that elevates the show to a different level that having it continue would have destroyed. So I'm completely okay if Taboo goes the way of 1 season, 1 and done. But let's close in a way that feels like an honest ending.
Yeah, could you imagine if Firefly turned into this thing where we're just going to different planets and meeting different alien races and just all the hijinks that could happen? And each episode was so potent in that show that it would just lose. It would be diluted in space.
And how many hours can people sit and say, "Oh man, what could have been?" They had the cast. What if they had just changed the sequence of the episodes? What if they had signed for 2 more? What if it had not bookended into the NFL on a Sunday? So many what ifs that feeds the whole subculture and still the love of it. Now, what are we, 14 years after?
Side note, I've talked to at least 2 other people who tried to introduce their significant other to Firefly, and the SO always falls asleep during episode 1. And it happened to me too. If that's happened to you, please write us, hosts@shatontv.com, and let us know about this, or tweet us at shatontv, because I'm baffled by this phenomenon. It somehow makes people's significant others fall asleep.
Wait, were you saying the first episode of Firefly? Or?
Yes. Yeah, Firefly.
Well, that they actually aired them out of order. That Serenity, the pilot, wasn't the first episode. That they reshuffled them to actually have it try to make more chronological sense. Even the intro's different, the voiceover. But how the hell do you fall asleep unless you just hate sci-fi?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, my girlfriend straight up fell asleep during it opens with a combat scene. I'm like, how are you falling asleep during this? So anyway, hey, it's not for everybody. Her argument is that every time we try to watch it, it's after 9 p.m. So,
that's what happens when you're 45.
Next up, we've got an email from my girlfriend's not 45. We got an email from Jenny in Bradenton, Florida. Jenny writes, I believe James putting his son in dangerous situations is his way of keeping him close. On its face, he appears to be very cold toward the boy, but in the scene where they were pulled over by the police, he puts the boy's cover over his face. To me, it was a glimpse of James being fatherly. Thanks, and that's from Jenny in Bradenton, Florida.
I buy into this. When I first read it, I was like, no way. I said, why? What father would put his son in danger? But if you think of it this way, James is worldly, he's traveled, he's capable, he's aware situationally. If he truly did love Robert, giving him the tools to survive London and survive the world whether it's deception, whether it's letting him know this is what's going on below the surface, would allow him to succeed as opposed to just ending up as a farmhand in a cottage, tending to livestock.
I think also in that scene that Jenny mentions, it's actually before they start moving the gunpowder. He kind of looks at his son. Or assuming it's his son, he makes a sort of a threatening speech to him, essentially. But then when he does put the mask over his face, I see there's a look of pride. There's a look of tenderness there where he's kind of seeing a younger version of himself, maybe, or seeing what his boy is becoming. Because remember, Robert, for being the age that he is, he goes in there, he's stirring the chlorate. He's among all these, thieves and killers. He's grown up tough, and it doesn't seem to faze him. None of it seems to faze him. He's a tough kid.
Yeah, when he gives Robert the speech about, now you're one of us, now you're part of it, so you can't turn us in. Robert looks like it's the first time that he's really been trusted or given something of substance, a task. Let's not forget, Robert saves the entire factory. Chun-Li and two of the stirrers, they're asleep. Robert wakes them up, slaps them. Without Robert, the show's over in a big puff of smoke. So the kid deserves credit. He took the initiative. He saw what was coming down when the soldiers were going to inspect the carriage and check the caskets. So good on him. The kid's already picking up life skills that'll help him survive long after James is gone.
So Big D, in that situation, do you think this is any way to raise your daughter? I mean, do you want her to follow in your dangerous footsteps?
Oh, 100%. Not military, no. But I do want her. A lot of fathers are possessive and try to control what their children do, especially daughters. You can't do that. They're going to be out of your control, and then they're left to make their own decisions. I won't always be there to protect her. So yes, I will teach my daughter to defend herself, to take care of herself. She'll work with me with tools. She'll work on the car. She's going to do things that traditionally daughters don't do. But I want her to never be dependent on anyone. And then when that day comes, when she needs to stand up for herself, it won't be the first time. She'll be prepared, and she'll be able to choke a dude out.
I think my mom attempted to do the same thing with me, but unfortunately my mom owned a salon. So, I don't know, it might have backfired a little bit as far as toughening me up, but I think I came out all right.
Yeah, I think she raised a gentleman. She did a pretty good job.
A gentleman who really knows how to take care of hair. Next up, we got Coach Marcus. Coach Marcus is a longtime listener to the podcast and writes in quite often and also offers us delicious meats. Coach Marcus writes, where to start? I guess if any art can elicit an emotional response, it is better than average, correct? I wasn't really happy with what they did with James, but I guess I understand it. I can't blame the writers for making James completely unhinged after having him so in control up to this point. On that note, did I feel the same way when Sir Stuart Strange had his panic attack last week? No. And Coach Marcus has 4 points. I'd like to go through them one by one. The first one, the ship. Maybe he has much more of an emotional attachment to his ship than previously shown. Clearly, he has some history with the ship, which may or may not be the reason he becomes completely unglued when the EIC scuttles his ship. Perhaps the EIC killed 2 birds with 1 stone, disrupting Delaney's plans and getting rid of possible evidence in lieu of the Chichester investigation. So what do you think of that, Big D?
So yeah, this is not only blowing up a ship, but it's a ship that meant something to him. I just really hope that James's entire act of becoming unhinged and reckless is not a diversion. That's not an act. That this isn't part of his plan, because that would be cheap to me.
Yeah, it makes him a little too clever. And, one of the issues that some people had with Westworld, again, was Dr. Ford being too omniscient, right? He just knew too much. He was able to predict too much. His plan always seemed to work out. There wasn't anything that surprised him. And so, again, I think with James, I'd like to see some flaws in him. I'd like to see that he is a bit reckless. And it kills you as a fan because you're going, you built so much. So many people are risking their lives for this mission. Don't screw this up. But at the same time, he is truly a flawed character, and he can't be strong on all fronts. So I agree with you, Big D. Next up is Zilpha. Coach Marcus writes, I didn't really like the reunion of James and Zilpha. There was little to no conversation or exposition on why she killed her husband when she did. Is it me, or did James hesitate when Zilpha says, I did it just like you showed me? I'm beginning to think that maybe Zilpha was the problem child and not James. I have other issues with this reunion, but let's see how it plays out.
I think he's acutely aware of what was going on in the marriage. He just didn't give her the instructions. So for the first time, he's viewing her as unstable. Whereas before, it was just he could easily believe she's living in a shell. She's forced into this box. That religion and marriage and her husband are forcing her to act in a way that's not her. That's his first insight to maybe she's got a screw loose.
This might surprise some listeners, but I've always had a lot of respect for people who don't talk very much. And some relationships, I don't feel like James and Zilpha are going to have the relationship where they're constantly talking about their feelings or extolling one another's virtues or being giddy about things. I don't think this is going to be the sort of relationship that's happy and in the sense of, smiling all the time and having a good time. We're not going to see a good time montage between the two of them, right? Their relationship is something much darker but very pure. And in that sense, I don't think that you are going to get much conversation or exposition. It's true to the characters. They don't need to say the things. The things are beyond words. And so I don't have a problem with that. As far as Zilpha being the problem child, I've said it before. I agree with that. I think James is actually the better of the two when it comes to actual decency.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes the strongest and closest relationships, you really don't need to say anything. When you can just sit down next to somebody, chill on a couch, and don't feel the need to hear yourself talk, it's a nice, relaxing and freeing feeling. And the days that I sit on the couch with my wife and we say 5 or 6 words, but yet we're still as connected as someone who's just jabbering on about their entire day, it makes me feel good.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is go up north. I live in Arizona, going up north and just going on hikes and not talking a lot. For all the talking we do on the show, talking done at work, talking done with people, small talk, it's nice to have some quiet there. And again, I think in like you said, Big D, especially if you spend a lifetime with a person, eventually it's nice to just have some quiet. So good observation, Coach Marcus. Up next is Ibbotson. Ibbotson, remember, is the farmer that is watching young Robert. Coach Marcus writes, Ibbotson, really, dude? You let the man produce gunpowder under your nose and exploit your surrogate child, which clearly you had feelings for, but you get creeped out when you see a bird carving in a barn? I call bullshit.
Oh, come on. A lot of people are okay with criminal activities, but once you start bringing religion into it, yeah, he's not scared necessarily of James breaking the law, but when it's the higher law, when it's God or it's the church, I believe that he was turning a blind eye to the criminal activity, but once voodoo and the devil was brought into his home, I could see him running to the church.
I think a big thing to note, and I think the show is trying to show us this, is that key difference between him and every other character in the show. He's not from London. He's not in the city. He's not involved in the politics and the science and the plotting and the underhanded dealings and the underbelly of London. He is outside of the city taking care of this boy. And typically, especially in this era, the people who were more rural tended to be more easily influenced by things like religion and guilt. And so note that he doesn't go and sell out James. He doesn't go to the EIC or go to the Crown and say, I've got him, give me the money, whatever. He goes to a priest, and that's all he's trying to do. The priest is the one that sells James out. So he thought he had a degree of confidence in the priest. And in that sense, it almost feels unfair for James to cut his tongue out when all he was doing was confessing to a man of God, he thought.
Yeah, I totally agree. I felt the only problem I had with it, when James appears with the flesh in his hand, with the steak that is the Iberson's tongue, I immediately knew what it was. I said to my wife, damn it, he cut his tongue out. And I hope that they didn't show it. When they show Ibbotson sitting in the pew with his mouth agape and the tongue missing, I was like, man, you didn't need to show us. You could have had him just dead there and leave it as somewhat of a mystery. So I felt they cheapened it that way, but I guess they were afraid some of the viewers wouldn't pick it up.
I thought quite the opposite. It was an example of the lengths James would go to. He went into a church, took a dead body with its tongue cut out, put it in a confession booth, and left it there for a priest to find. Like, that's pretty extreme.
No, I was okay, but we didn't need his mouth wide opened.
Oh, gotcha.
showing that his tongue was missing. Yeah, stick him in the pew. That was great. You really wanted to affect the priest before you killed him? Great. But as a viewer, his mouth wide open. Oh, look, the tongue's missing. Didn't need it.
All right. And finally, winter. 3 things about winter. 1, killing kids is the ultimate taboo. Again, we have a viewer who's upset about the kid killing. 2, she was the one character that I wanted to see play out to the end. 3, is this proof enough that maybe the brandy is poisoned? I do believe it is a setup, but damn, did you have to kill her? I really need to decompress after this one, fellas. Can't wait till the podcast. Later much, Coach Marcus.
We debated, whether this was truly something that should give people nightmares. I mean, child murder, unfortunately, you turn on the evening news, you're going to see probably 2 or 3 cases of it tonight. But to me, it looks obviously it's a frame job. If the East India or the Crown want to get the Nunca Treaty, and we haven't heard them talk about it in an episode or 2, it's been all about James and gunpowder, framing him for a murder and using that as leverage to get him to sign off the property seems to be the only hand that they have to play. And I think that's the route that this is going.
Yeah, I'm still surprised by the amount of attachment that so many viewers have to Winter. She, to me, seemed like sort of a throwaway character. And I don't mean that in the sense that because she's a child or because she's a little girl or anything like that, but more to the effect of, I guess I didn't connect with that character as much as other people did. She seemed to come in every now and then, say a creepy thing, but I wonder what her magic was that made people really connect with her. Is it that she was a child, or was there something more than that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's the appearance of the smaller frame, of that wide-eyed, that she seemed inquisitive, she was intelligent. But why do people have such an affinity for her, but 3 years later, when they would be a young teen prostitute in the brothel, people don't give a shit? We see the women in the brothel being abused, smacked around, raped, ostensibly. Nobody cares about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because one of my friends, Chet, who's also a listener to the podcast and a fan of Taboo, we were talking the other day about children being heroes in a lot of new programming. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but he was saying, it is interesting that on Stranger Things, for instance, you got a lot of kids in that cast, and people will more readily identify and support a child right off the bat. And I think that goes back to just the truth that we know as people, is that adults are shitty and kids tend to be a lot better. So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, I think children are also perceived as innocent. They're almost victims of their circumstance. They haven't had yet a chance to really make their own errors, their mistakes. They can be rescued. People always love a good restoration project. So when they look at Summer, they see potential instead of some of the other cast of characters here who are already damaged souls that are not recoverable. They're not worth saving. But a child, there's always potential.
All right. And finally, thanks, Coach Marcus. Finally, we've got a bonus email. And this one, if you remember last River Rants, I wasn't here. Big D and Raj were talking about the supercut. And it's been done. It was actually done. It's posted on Independent's website at independent.co.uk, and we'll post it on Shat on TV as well. It's titled Taboo, Every Time Tom Hardy Grunts, condensed into one magical video. The magical video spans 40 seconds and totals 72 grunts.
Yeah, and keep in mind, that's through 5 episodes. That was before episode 6, so we might be up to maybe 78, 80. It is fantastic to watch. I'll add the audio here for fun, but the visuals, they make it. Take the time, click the link. It's a good 40 seconds.
Yeah, again, that's on the Independence website, or you could just go to shatontv.com and we'll post a link on there as well. Big D will roll the audio so you can enjoy. Just close your eyes and imagine so much beefy Tom Hardy grunting and groaning.
What's that?
And that's a wrap for the River Rants for this week. Thank you so much to everyone who wrote in. We've got more already stacked up for next week that have been rolling in while we've been recording this, so that's pretty awesome. So be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, just search for Shat on TV Podcasts. The website is shatontv.com. And if you want to write into us for your own River Rant, write into hosts@shatontv.com. We'll be happy to read that on the air. Also, remember that a lot of these are truncated for airtime. The entire email can be read at shatontv.com if you just go under the River Rants section of the website. And also, we do read all of them and post all of them to the website. So even if you didn't make it on the air, you will be on the website. So be sure to indicate if you do not want to be read on the air or do not want to be on the website. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, be sure to leave a 5-star review that helps the podcast grow.
You know, reviews help us, but also if you know somebody who likes the show, recommend us, or you have a friend who's looking for a good TV show, aim them at Taboo. The more people watching the show, the more people talking about it. So share the show, share the cast, leave a review, and let's keep the community going. But we enjoy having everybody along the ride with us, so thank you very much.
So on behalf of my co-host, Roger Roper and Dick Ebert, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Tuesday for the next Taboo FX deep dive immediately after episode 7 of Taboo. And with that, keep on rolling down the river, friends.